Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. My name is Nadia. I'm a UK Global Talent Visa recipient and coach, which means that I got endorsed for this visa last year as a software engineer. And currently, I help talented IT professionals and also creative professionals get endorsed for the visa as well. So, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, this is a channel where I share information about immigration to the UK, specifically within the context of the Global Talent Visa. So if you're interested in relocating to the UK, then I suggest that you subscribe and support the channel if you want to see more content like this. So today I'm joined by Sray. Welcome.
Hi, Nadia. Thank you for.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Maybe we can start with some intros and you can tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do for a living, what is your professional background.
Hi, I'm Sray Agarwal. I have been in UK since last 5 years, precisely from 2017 2018. I am basically from India and I stay in London. I am an AI professional. I work in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. I work for a company called Fractal Analytics, where I lead their UK operations when it comes to AI. I am also an author of a book which is called Responsible and Ethical AI. I'm also a member of United Nations as an expert. I'm also Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in AI awarded for last 3 years. And I am active bloggers. I always like to help people coming into this field, coming to UK and helping the digital economy of UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the intro. So, when did you have this idea of getting the global talent visa, and why did you decide to apply for it, or did you move on this visa initially?
Okay, so I was in when I came to UK on 2017, I was on tier 2 ICT visa, which is called intercompany transfer visa, and everything was going well. But then I came to know that I need to go out of UK for 1 year for cooling off if I want a visa extension, or if I want to switch to another job, or if I want to do something of my own. I'm not eligible of doing it without very strict rules and regulations. Like you need to go out for UK for 1 year. When you come back, you have to find a new sponsors. So all this was creating a lot of, I'll say, hiccups and was creating bottlenecks in my plan. I was not able to execute my plan of, say, changing a job or doing something of my own, or doing something part time and doing more to upskill myself easily. So that allowed me to explore multiple other opportunities, and one of those opportunity was to look for another visa, a visa which will give me more freedom, will give me more independence, and would also allow me to do something without without having a bottleneck or having a dependency on some external factors. And that is while researching for everything, I came across something called tier 1 exceptional talent visa slash global talent visa. Right, so when I applied, it was exceptional talent, and the moment I applied, it became global talent. Right, and that is where I started talking to multiple peoples on LinkedIn, understand uh, what is global talent visa, what is tier 1, what are the different um, opportunity it will give me, what are the different freedom it will give me, and how will it make my life much more easier, give me more flexible, and reduce the dependency on other external factor. And that is where I thought of researching more on tier 1 visa and getting one for myself.
Mm-hmm. So, what was the process like for you getting the visa? How long did it take you to do your research, prepare the documents, apply? How long did it take you to go from learning about the visa to actually getting endorsed?
Yeah, so very interesting question. Thank you for that. So when I started researching on tier 1 visa, I met a couple of people, and they told me and talked me through what are the different things which I need to do. I went to through their website like millions of times so that I don't miss on anything. And after that, me being a very structured person, I made an Excel sheet where what are the different criterias, what are the most mandatory criterias and non-mandatory criterias, and what all I can do. And I started mapping elements which I had. For example, I was very active in conferences as a speaker. I have done a lot of certification to upskill myself. I built a lot of prototypes. I kept that. I had a huge GitHub account where I had my codes. And then started listing down people I know, right? Who can give me letters of endorsement and letters of support. Because I always believe that if I say that I have done X, it is not very valuable. So if I say if I have done X and somebody else supports that, yes, Shrey has done this and it was impactful, that will be more impactful. So in that cases, I started. I know I mentored a couple of startups, mentored students for that matter. So I wrote that. I collected all the evidences and asked them to write a letter for me that what exactly I did for them, what all did, how much time did I spend, what all different things I did for them. So that is how I started making multiple evidences for myself, and I made around 10 to 12 evidences plus three letters. And this evidences had my GitHub account plus letters. I had mentorships, and for I gave mentor I've been mentored students and mentored startups. Those evidences plus letters, I mentored couple of you know uh, professionals, executives. I had those letters. I took some training sessions online and in person. I had those letters. I have some architecture diagram of things which I was doing. I had a letter from my publisher that I'm writing a book with an small abstract of the book. I had my GitHub account. I had some YouTube videos which I made. I had that. I had some conferences which I um, added to the list and got a couple of letters from the conference organizers. I made a list of 10 or 12 articles which I wrote. I made a list of those with hyperlinks and small summary of each of them. I also had some letter of support from my colleagues, um, some people who were working under me, people who were working with me, and maybe people who are a bit senior to me, cross cross designations, maybe one or two letter of support. I also had some letters uh, from external parties, third parties, where I helped them with some white papers and things like that. I've lettered from United Nations that I have written a white paper for them and screenshot of their website where they mentioned my name. So those were the things I collected. And for each of this evidence which I collected, I also mentioned what was the evidence number. So, does it qualify for evidence number one, which says he has to be upskilling himself, or he has to do some external participation, or was he awarded something? And when I eventually made everything, simply was able to conclude that one evidence can be um, tagged to multiple activities as listed in TechNation website. And that is where eventually I had 10 evidences, but it was actually 30 to 40, because one evidences was allowing me to qualify for multiple factors mentioned in TechNation. And up and above that, I have letter of support from multiple other people, people who I work with and people whom I don't work with, in sense third party and external members whom I knew.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. I would like just to add for the record, since I think 14th of April 2023, you can't actually map one evidence to several criteria, which was possible before. Now it's explicitly forbidden. So if you're applying now, make sure that you're following the latest guidance. But it seems like you had a very structured process as to preparing the documents, and going through the documents, mapping them to the criteria. So which criteria did you end up choosing, if you still remember?
I exactly do not remember, but there was this criteria number one, or the first or the second
Mm-hmm.
criteria. I actually don't remember. The
Yeah.
most important thing I think was to write the statement of purpose. Was the
Yeah,
most
maybe you could tell us. Maybe you could tell us a bit more in more detail. What was your approach to writing it, and maybe any tips that can help people who are approaching this right now.
Yeah. So, you know, against the normal way of working, I wrote statement of purpose towards the end. So when I collected all the evidences, I wanted it to get summarized into one simple thing, and that is where my statement of purpose came in. And thus I was also able to logically define that why I am putting an evidence. So why that evidence, how will that help UK economy? So everything which was added as an evidence, I ensure that I also write that how will that help UK economy. So, for example, if I had 10 evidence, how will it help UK economy? And just not how will it help UK economy, how as a person in next 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, I'll be able to add value to UK economy. What are my plans? What are my plan of doing something of my own? What are my plan to help others? What are my plan to bring in more money, more skills, more talent to UK? So that was the entire thing. So my first paragraph was what am I about, what I am doing, followed by a summary of what all I have been doing and how it will help UK economy. And the last paragraph, which was the most important paragraph, was how will I add value to UK economy in future, both monetary value and non-monetary value. And in that, also tried to give some numbers like I'll be able to bring this much $1 million pounds to UK economy, this much I'll be able to attract this much talent to economy. I have, for example, mentored 10 people across 500 hours across three topics in last 3 years. So I also started giving numbers because I didn't want it to be just qualitative and subjective. I wanted it to be highly quantitative. And that is where I was able to write a very strong statement of purpose. And I guess that played a very, very important role.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing. I think that it's actually a very smart approach to write the personal statement at the end, towards the end, when you already have the rest of the evidences. This is usually how I approach it, because then it's easier for you to see what you have, which criteria you're meeting. And then the statement is both about what you will do for the economy, but also about how you are already a global talent, how you met the criteria. And it's a summary of your career, very short summary. Obviously, you don't have that much space there, but yeah, I think it's a nice approach, and this is what I recommend to people to do it last. But it doesn't mean that you do it last minute, as in you don't spend any time on it. It just means that you do it after the rest of the stuff is prepared, but you still need to spend time on it. Every document there is important. I personally think that personal statement is probably one of the most important documents in the application, because it allows you to connect the dots, to fill in the gaps in your evidences, to kind of explain things. And also it will be the first document that they will read once they assess you. So I think it's very important for you to make a good impression, sort of, the first good impression. I think it really matters. I wanted to remind people watching this live that you are very welcome to ask questions live of the guest or me, and we'll be happy to go through them. Also, you can ask them later in comments, but I think live is just more fun. We actually had one question, and we can maybe handle it right now. So it was, do we need to be mentors to apply for a global talent visa? So yeah, I think that you don't have to be a mentor. It's just that a lot of my guests, they have mentorship experience, right? But it's not a requirement, but it's something that makes it easy to meet one of the criteria. The second one is, I think, the classical example there is to use some examples of mentorship to meet the criteria. Could you tell us more a bit about the mentorship experience that you had, and what kind of documents you submitted to prove it? Maybe in more detail, because again, this is something that people always ask about, the details and just the details of everything.
So, I guess I missed one of your question. How much time did it take? So whenever I
Yeah.
mentor people for global talent visa, I tell them to dedicatedly have 6 months of their 1 year, half a year dedicated to prepare for global talent visa. Because if something is missing, you can actually work on it over 6 months and create that evidence logically and genuinely, right? So that's very, very important, right? And that brings me to mentorship. So there are two kind of mentoring which I had. One was my in-company mentor, where I mentored a couple of my colleagues on upskilling themselves, teaching them AI and Python and advanced machine learning. So in that case, I kept in mind what all topics did I teach. So I mentioned that these are the 5 topics that I taught, These were the number of people who attended my session. These were the number of hours which I dedicated, and this was the change which they had in their life. So, for example, after getting mentorship from me for on 5 topic for say 50 hours, they were able to switch their job profile. They were able to get promoted, or they were able to get into a job area where they always wanted to get into. That was the first kind of mentorship. The second kind of mentorship I had was I helped a student complete his dissertation project. So, in that case, also, I had an abstract of his dissertation. I wrote what are the topics on which I mentored them, very, very specific. Number of hours I mentored him, and also took a letter from him where he stated that I mentored him and how it helped him, and how did it help him to complete his dissertation and get his graduation degree. The third kind of mentorship I did was mentoring couple of my friends who had startups. So I mentored them on video conferences. So I talked about the areas which I mentored, people, their designation, number of hours, and topics which I mentored. And that became one evidence. So one evidence consists of 3 types of mentorship which I give. And I clubbed it with letter from that startup, clubbed it with letter from that particular student whom I mentored, and maybe a self-declared letter where I told that I mentored couple of people. These are their profiles, these are the topic, these are the number of hours, and this is the impact it created. Impact is very, very important. Otherwise, if you mentor somebody and it does not help, it has no value. And always try to put numbers so that these are the 5 topics. So if I say I mentored them on machine learning, holds less value. But if I tell them that I mentored them on machine learning, allowed them to sharpen their skills in probability and say statistics, I taught them linear algebra or classification, and I devoted X amount of time for each of these, like 10 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours. And the mode of delivery was say in person, online, or research paper. So those kind of detailing would leave no space for somebody to reject your application, because at the end of the day it should be so good that if somebody has some any kind of question in their mind, the answer should be in the evidence, because you will not be there to represent yourself or to answer any queries. So everything which you think should be inside that one piece of evidence.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the approach is really clever here as well, because as you said, you're not there to represent yourself, so you should make sure that everything that you have is basically in the application. It also applies to this idea with this like thing with links. Sometimes people don't put everything that they want in the application, but they just add links and they're like, oh, follow some links and then you will see more. So you shouldn't count on people to open links and like do the extra effort of actually trying to understand what you're trying to say. It should be all there, very explicit and super. I really like your approach to show the impact of your mentorship. I wanted to add something just again for the purpose of June 2023. Like most recently, I've seen that kind of one-on-one mentorships, this was one-on-one mentorship, right? We had a question
Yeah.
about it, right? So most recently, like one-on-one mentorships haven't been working that well in terms of endorsements. So I usually advise people to mentor through an organized program where there is a curriculum and selection process for mentors. It's just a sure thing that this will work. But generally the approach that you use, this is like a golden approach. So if you have an organized mentorship program that you mentor through, just use the approach that's Ray just described, and this will be golden.
So I did both. So the student whom I mentored was one on one, but there
Yeah.
were other mentorship which I did, which are attached as another evidence, which were organizational mentorship. Um, what's it? I enrolled for a mentorship program where they enrolled me after my verification as a trainer, and then
Mm-hmm.
I trained a couple of people, and I took a letter from that body that I was in their paneled as a trainer, as a mentor, and I mentored say 25 people on this topic for this many hours, from this particular date to this particular date on
Mm-hmm.
their letterhead. So I also had one evidence, something which we say organizational
Yeah.
mentorship, but that was a third party, and which is very, very valuable. and which you can
Mm-hmm.
always, you have these online courses and online program where you can go as a trainer, you can go as a mentor, and you can take a, and where they first verify your credential. You need to match their standards. Once you do that, they impanel you, and then you take a, say, course of 15 hours, 21, 100 hours, 200 hours over a time period of 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, and then you mentor. And that is why I told you need to devote 6 months of your time, because sometimes if you do not have that, you can actually find out those kind of organization, get yourself empaneled, and do a 2 or 3 or 4 months of training sessions for like 50 or 20 or 30 attendees for that program.
Yeah. I think that also is, people need to be aware that if your evidences are all very recent and done very closely to your application, it's quite likely that technician would reject. If if like everything that you have ever done is just within the last 3 months,
Yeah.
then you should be aware that it looks suspicious, right? But still, of course, like if you have a longer time horizon, you can plan and do some of the things that you wanted to do that would make your application stronger. So when it comes to your letters of recommendation, you briefly mentioned them. Any kind of tips that you would like to share with people for first finding experts who are, established and impressive enough for this role, because it's very important to have experts that have like a good profile and a good standing in the industry. And then also any tips on, what should be in the letters, like what is the content that should be there to get people endorsed.
Okay. So at my time, there was 3 letter of endorsement required, compulsory. And plus, I gave 3 letter of endorsement plus 5 letter of support with each evidences. So when it comes to letter of endorsement, these are the most important letters, and you should select your people who will write those letters very, very, very nicely. Always have mix of people. So I had one person whom I was reporting to in my organization, but not my boss. It was a very, very senior person who knew me personally, who knew me very nicely, who appreciated my work, number one. The second person was outside my world, and the third person was again outside my work but outside UK. So two-person in UK, one inside my work, one outside my work, third person outside UK who are outside my work. So I gave a variety, and all these three people were stalwarts in that field. So the first paragraph they write is what they are, like in brief. I also attached their LinkedIn profile, one page or LinkedIn profile, what they are in brief. The next paragraph, what, how do they know me, and in one what capacity they know me. So like, and how long they have known. So again, numbers are very, very important. So they have known me for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or whatever, and in what capacity they know me. How do I met them? Did I meet them through conferences, or did I have done some kind of collaborative work with them? So all this detail. The third paragraph are what are the work which I have done, which they appreciate and they are aware of. There are few people who have seen my conferences, my teachings, my lectures. There are few people who have seen me building some stuff. So all these details, and it should not be like, oh, I've seen their conferences. Which conferences? When? What was the topic? What did you like in that very topic? For example, if I write about responsible AI, what is one area of responsible AI which popped up? How many hours it was, when it happened, where it happened, all this. And the fourth thing is, what is one potential in me which I should, uh, s- my potential which should allow technician and home office to give me that visa. What, so what will I do in future? What are the things they see in me which will help UK economy in future? So that was the fourth paragraph. And fifth paragraph, concluding remarks, that uh, how they know me and how will I help them, and am I a definite candidate and have a right potential. So this was the kind of letters, these were the kind of format which they wrote. Of course, all the 3% had the different ways of writing, but eventually at the end of the day, all the three had predominantly all these 4 or 5 information in their letter, for sure. And all, of course, numbers and incidences.
Yeah. I think this is great advice. I think what people sometimes struggle with is writing is kind of having the letters that are concrete and that have concrete information in them and that are not vague. And again, it's very easy to get rejected by technician if your letters and your documents are vague. So the advice that you are now sharing about sharing numbers and giving like concrete details about the conference, about the topic, about the numbers that you mentored, this is all great stuff. And I always recommend people do as much of that as possible. Include as many details as you can, right? Whatever you can share, just to make it more concrete, more trustworthy in a way. Because this kind of information, this kind of detail, it just makes it look like, obviously, like all of this should be real, but it kind of makes it easier to visualize everything that happened, right? If there are details, it's easier to visualize some event. And if it's very vague, then it's just, sometimes it's kind of, you can scan through a document and you still don't know what you just saw, whether it's important or not. So I think this is all great advice. And I think that everything that you said, it still applies, even though the rules changed. I would say that I recommend to people who are listening to this and who are applying in the future, always make sure that you're following the latest version of the technician guide, because it gets updated quite often. So the things that we share today, they might not be relevant in the future, but the guide, I think, is the single source of truth. And if you're, preparing your documents, make sure that the letters that you have, they follow the guidance that is there. All the bullet points that are there, they're not nice to have. They have to be in a letter, because again, I sometimes see people, my clients come to me and maybe they're missing some of those points. And the idea is that everything that is in the guide, it should be in your letters, right? So for instance, if as you said, like the letter should explain how this person knows you. And right now, the requirement is that they have to know you for at least 12 months, which
Yep.
wasn't a requirement before. So it kind of, you have to show the thing that you have known them for a while, and they're not just random people who are writing this for you for some reason. So I think this is all very helpful. So yeah, so we've talked about the criteria, we've talked about the letters of recommendation, the personal statement. Another document that you need to submit is the CV. Do you have any tips or any advice for people for how to create a great CV for the global talent visa?
So two things. So in the CV, I gave couple of links. I gave a link of my LinkedIn and of my GitHub. So your CV should be aligned to that. You cannot have a CV which is something else, talks about something else. Your evidence talks about something else, and your LinkedIn talks about something else. So if I say I am an AI professional since more than a decade, my CV should talk about that. My evidence should reflect those, and even my LinkedIn should reflect those. So those are the couple of things which you start with. Start with a normal CV about yourself, name, address, phone number, email addresses, your LinkedIn ID, your GitHub ID, your Stack Flow, everything. Talk briefly about yourself and ensure that whatever is in your CV matches your LinkedIn, and also is a reflection of the evidence you have give. And then talk about your work experience in chronological order, your skill sets. Now, your skill set should again match your evidences. So, for example, if I write, I've given a training in Python and my CV does not have Python, then it can be a bit dicey. So try to map all these aspects, put your work in details in chronological order. In other activities, so for example, let's say I wrote a book, that should be also in my CV, so that and that should also be on my LinkedIn, right? If I say that I have taken sessions through this training program for so many people in this month, that should be in your CV and on your LinkedIn. And so those kind of, so for example, hobbies or areas of interest should match and reflect something from your evidences and from your LinkedIn. So I think so you should align everything very nicely. Go, CV has to be very brief, 1 or 2 pages. Follow that pattern, but ensure that there is nothing in the CV which contradict either your LinkedIn or your evidences. Should never be. Everything should be free flowing, should match. It should be more like a mind map. Everything is connected with everything. It's like a spider web. Otherwise, if one string is broken, it will be very, very visible, and it will give enough reason for somebody to question the entire application, and worst thing worse, reject your application.
I agree. I always recommend to my clients that they double check everything before they apply and make sure that everything matches up. As you said, the dates, the places where they worked, all of those details, they like everything should make sense, everything should be connected, because sometimes I would hear of people getting rejected because there is some mismatch between their CV and their LinkedIn, right? And the dates don't match. And then technicians have trouble matching their place of work to the letter of recommendation, right? Because those things should still match as well. For instance, if you have a letter of recommendation from a place of work and it mentions some dates that you work there, and then your CV has some other dates and your LinkedIn something else, then it all becomes really, as you said, dicey and questionable. And your goal is to make sure that everything reads very nicely, everything matches, and everything makes sense. And you really want this experience for the technician assessor to be as easy as possible when they're reviewing the docs. And so it's always worth, I think, double checking everything, that everything makes sense, everything matches up. For the CV, I think that the requirement is up to 3 pages, and I've seen a lot of people use actual 3 pages, and they have like all of their publications, public speeches, volunteering, mentorship, and like all of those things in the CV as well. So it becomes like a longer version of our usual CV, so which works as well. And also for people who have academic background, they would have their publications there, like academic publications, their conferences there as well. So yeah, I think this covers the kind of the main documents there. So I'm just curious, since you got the visa, what kind of change have you experienced in your life, and what kind of influence has the visa had on you as a professional?
Yeah, very interesting. Now, before I come to that question, I'll tell you a very interesting fact. So when I was applying for visa, I was not very sure shall I apply for 3 years or 5 year route. And I didn't miss, like, for me 2 years didn't matter so much, right? So I applied for a 5 years route, but given the kind of experience I had, 10 years, 12 year, my evidence, I was awarded a 3 years route. So anybody, I would always suggest anybody who is not tight pressed with time, apply for 5 years, and if they like your application, they'll give you for 3 years, right? So it happens a lot. So when you apply for longer period, and if they like everything is good, and they see you fit for 3 years, they give you 3 years easily, right? So don't have to worry about that. After applying for visa, the lot things have changed. Number one, I am able to do a lot of things outside my job which I was not able to do. Number one. Number two, I can apply to company who do not offer sponsorship, or I do not have to ask sponsorship from a lot of company. That I am okay. You just give me work, you assess me, that's it. I will take care of legalities of working in UK. Number two. Number three, I am more independent in sense I am more flexible in what I can do, where I can do, and about my income and things like that. And number four, I guess the process of ILR becomes more streamlined because you know what needs to be done. You are already, and even for getting a visa at Space Team, just you need your letter of endorsement from technician, and just passport and your old BRP if you have. Just submit all these three thing or four thing, and you are visa is stage 2 is sorted. Unlike other visa, where you have to give your education qualification, English certificate, you have to give your income proof or a bank statement, so many things. Here you don't have to give anything. Fourth, your ILR, as I told, becomes very, very streamlined. And fifth, you can actually focus on your career goals and professional goals rather than thinking about sponsorship and visa extensions and visa expiry and things like that. So those are the things, becomes very, very streamlined, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to also remind people that you can still ask your questions. We still have a bit of time. We had some questions. I don't know, some question in chat that is not finished. So I'll wait until it comes. The whole thing comes to us. So yeah, I agree that all of those benefits are valuable, and I think that this is probably the biggest reasons why people apply for the visa, just for all the benefits that you mentioned. Just for the record and to clarify things, for the 3-year route and the 5-year route. So for the promise route, which is the 5-year route, you are encouraged to apply for it only if you have fewer than 5 years experience. So if you apply for this route, if you have more years than 5, then you will be evaluated under talent. So it's it's a bit more complicated than kind of choosing the route. So it's connected to how early you are in your career. So you also need to be aware of that. Okay, we had the question.
Yes, please.
Let's look. Yeah, I did my MSc in ML from a UK university, and in last semester it was mandatory to write a dissertation paper. Will it count as evidence? Did you apply it for the? Did you use the academic criteria or in your application, Sray?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. So I can do this one. So Renish, not sure whether you're planning to apply soon or not, and whether you're planning to choose the academic criteria. So yeah, basically, for the academic criteria, they're usually looking for work that was done outside the. I guess this is a master's degree, right? So yeah, the work that was done outside the master's degree. So if you're doing something for a PhD, this can be used, or if you have peer-reviewed papers that are published in peer-reviewed journals, or you have some talks that you have done at peer-reviewed conferences. This is the kind of evidence that you can use. So it should be something that is kind of outside the thing that is absolutely mandatory and kind of the minimum requirement that you need to graduate, right? So they're looking for something a little bit bigger than that. They're looking for your contributions to the growth of the digital economy through research. So that's the basic idea. But also on my channel, you can find people who were using this criteria and who were using their academic background to apply, and you can see what kind of documents they used. So I hope this helps. Okay, yeah. So maybe to start to wrap up, maybe you could. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us? Any challenge that you faced, or any tips that you learned throughout the process, and anything that you wish somebody told you before you started?
Nothing like that, because I met a lot of great people who helped me to get the visa, and then I mentored a lot of people, and I guess 9 out of 10 got this visa. The second thing I'll tell is keep your finances right, because the moment you get your visa, and if you're very sure about it, there's a hefty amount of money which you need for IHS and visa fees and stuff like that. So please keep that amount separate. You do not want to delay the process of getting a visa after, or basically passing the stage 2 after you have cleared stage 1. Stage 1 is not so expensive, but stage 2 requires a good lump sum of money. So keep that. So when you are preparing for the entire visa process for 6 months, 8 months, whatever time you are taking, also ensure that you keep a good block of money, funds separate to get everything done. And I don't know the latest cost, but it should be on the home office website and technician website.
Yeah.
Just keep that money on side. Do not touch that, so that you do not face any difficulty later on.
Yeah, I agree. It's currently it's £660 per year per person for the health surcharge, which is basically the health insurance. So yeah, if you're applying for 5 years, especially if you have dependents, so you need to pay that for each dependent. It's cheaper for children, but still it's quite a lot. So yeah, this is why a lot of people actually don't get the full 5 years or 3 years at once. They get the visa for a few years and then they extend it. Which is also an option, but it's it has its own drawbacks, because you need to do that in a few years' time, and a lot of people just save up and get the visa for the maximum number of years, so that you just don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, but I think that sometimes people don't fully realize how expensive it gets when they know the fee for the stage 1, which is £456, which is still a lot, especially if you're outside the UK, but it's kind of manageable. But then once you get the visa, I guess this is where the real expenses start. So you need to be prepared for that. Yeah, so I think this is all great advice. We don't have any new questions. If you have questions, if you watch this as a recording, make sure to ask them in comments. I always go through them. Okay, there is actually one question. Suppose if the visa is approved and everything is done, does it become mandatory for one to live in the UK, or can I choose my period of stay for? Yeah, so generally you're not required to live in the UK. Of course, you don't have to come even if you have the visa. But if you want to get the permanent residency, then there are requirements for you to actually live in the UK for certain periods. Visa is valid. Okay. Once again, I can choose my period of stay for period visa as well. Yeah. So as I said, you can apply for the whole 5 years, 3 years, or you can choose a shorter period of time. A lot of people apply for the whole duration that you can get. Some people get it for shorter. But I think the biggest question here is that like you don't lose your visa basically if you don't come here, right? It's still kind of, it will be valid for 5 years. But if you want to get the permanent residency, then you won't be able to if you haven't lived in the UK. Also, if you get the visa for just a few years and then you want to extend it, you need to prove that you have made money in the UK within digital technology if you have the visa in digital technology. So then this becomes an issue as well. So yeah, not sure I understand completely the question, but yeah, I think the biggest consideration here is, what basically your further plans. I don't know if Sray, you have anything to add to this, to the date, to the periods of validity and visas.
No, but just be careful that you have to your Vignet, you need to come to UK within a
Yeah.
specific come and take your BRP. Otherwise, that creates issue.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. So basically, you need to follow kind of the guidance. But I know that some people, they come to the UK, they get their BRP,
And
then
then
they stay here. Yeah, they go back and then they come back. So like there are options. It's quite flexible. But yeah, you need to understand like what are your long-term plans. If you want to get the permanent residency, then you need to watch the days that you are out of the UK in a year, and watch that stuff. Okay, there's another question. Concerning working on gaps within 6 months, how much is it possible? For example, public speaking opportunities, how many of this can you do? Or is 1 or 2 speaking engagements enough? So I think that here, the answer here is very much, it depends. It's very hard to answer such a question within generically outside of a personal consultation, like looking at your case holistically, right? So I can't really say like is 1 enough or is 2 enough, right? It's like there are no magic numbers here. So yeah, I think it depends like what your gaps are. So sometimes people, they have everything, they are just missing maybe a conference talk. Then it's like you can go and do the conference talk, and then your case is complete. But it depends, I think, on your situation. I don't know if you sure want to add something to that, but I think it's very hard to give such advice without looking at the whole
and you don't
case,
have a
right?
number. Yeah, you don't have a number.
Yeah.
But if you are applying for visa tomorrow and you have done a conference in last 1 month, 2 months, that would not be very valid. It should be that it's a continuous process that you have been doing regularly, and
Yeah.
say in last 5 years you have done it like 15 times or 10 times, but it has to be have the right gap. If you have done all your conference in last 2 weeks or 1 month, that does not count. Number one. Number two, when you write about conference, you write about where it happened, under which organization, right? Which topic, how many people attended it, what was the duration, and what was the impact. That depends. For example, if you're giving a TED talk which has been uh, visited by 1 million people, that has a different impact rather than giving a 10 small talks. So depend upon the size, the gravity of the conference where you have spoken. So public speaking is very subjective. So as Nadia told,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
there's no mathematical formula for that.
Yeah. I think people very often want to have like an idea of, they would ask like how many public talks should I have, like how many publications should I have, and I don't think there is a number. It's kind of about the whole case holistically, and we need to evaluate everything together and see how strong the case is before we can say that something else is missing. But also I would say that the cases, since I've seen so many cases myself, like I would say that every case is super different from every other case. At some point you see some trends and you get a feeling for what works and what doesn't. But outside of seeing these trends, it honestly, it's very hard to understand like whether you have enough or you don't have enough. I think there are two ways here. Like one is to either seek like free help from technician ambassadors, from forums or Telegram chats, or you can get some paid help so that somebody can review your whole case and give you some guidance. Or if you just don't want to do any of this, you can basically try to apply with everything that you have presented in the way that we are describing it here, and seeing whether they reject you or not. And then you will have detailed feedback from technician, and they will say what exactly you're missing. They will say what exactly you still need to have, right? They will say that you're missing, like this criteria is not granted because you don't have enough public speaking. They will tell you that, right? Then you will have concrete information that you're missing public speaking or awards or something like this, and then you can take some time, take I don't know, a year or something like this to work on your profile and apply again. So there are various ways to around it. So yeah, I think having somebody look at your case is helpful. But then sometimes people just want to apply and see. I think that it's also an option. Like you apply and if you think you have a good case, you can apply. If it's not good enough, you will just get rejected. It's sad, and I know it's stressful for people to get rejected, but yeah, it's quite common actually to get rejected the first time, especially if you apply. It happens more often than people think, because we hear stories of success, right? We have this survival, kind of the mistake of seeing that someone survive, right? But we don't see failures here. So yeah, it creates this weird perception. But I think a lot of people get rejected. So that's I think the way to answer it. I hope this helps, Charles. Yeah, no further questions coming. So I think, yeah, we can then wrap up. Thank you so much, Ray, for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you everybody for tuning in and spending part of your evening with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.